For years, I've had this bucket list dream to circle the entire Mediterranean. This summer, I'm finally turning this dream into a reality by traveling to 6 countries in just 40 days with my sister Sage. Together, we really want to see these places through a feminine lens and specifically share the stories of local women along the way. When we were planning this trip around the Mediterranean, Lebanon was one of our top dream destinations, as I spent a summer in Beirut about 6 years ago, but we thought we wouldn't really be able to pull it off just for a variety of reasons. So as we started planning our trip, my friend at the time, Ramsey, who lives here in New York, told me he was visiting his family in Lebanon, basically around the same time that I'd be circling the Mediterranean, and invited Sage and I to come stay with his family. The timing honestly ended up being perfect, and the Lebanese are some of the most hospitable people around, so we were so excited to be able to stay with locals and experience the country in this unique way. So, before I knew it, Sage and I rearranged our flight and we're headed to Lebanon. So like I mentioned, this actually isn't my first time here. My brother lived in Lebanon for 3 years, and so when I was in college at 19 years old, I interned with the humanitarian nonprofit that he worked for. So I was here for a summer. The focus was on the refugee crisis in Lebanon, and I spent over a month living in Beirut in this neighborhood called Burj Hamoud, and often commuted to the refugee camps along the border of Syria and the Bekaa Valley. I really fell in love with the locals, the food, the culture, and the history, and since then, Lebanon has continuously fascinated me and really held a large piece of my heart, and I've always wanted to visit again. And so now, at the age of 25, I am so excited to see more of this beautiful country. Over this next week, we're headed to Beirut, Batroun, Byblos, and Tripoli. We're also here to meet Sarah, the founder of Sarah's Bag, a really incredible fashion house and a social enterprise that creates these really stunning handcrafted bags through employing at-risk local female artisans. As you'll see, Lebanon is a country packed with contradictions and complexities, as well as recent devastation, but it also holds so much warmth and strength, and honestly, so much fun. I'm really thrilled to be here to discover as much as I can and to learn more about what it's like to be a woman here. Hello!
Hello!
Sister duo, back at it again. Really excited to be back. This is Sage's first time.
Our brother actually lived here for 3 years, from like 2015 to like 2018. And I think his stories and photos from living in Beirut were super impactful for both of us. And so it's amazing to finally go see it for ourselves.
For yourself.
For myself.
I will also say I feel like this location is one of our most nuanced in this trip. Lebanon has been through a lot, especially since when I was last here. It's been through a lot throughout the entirety of its history,
yes,
but especially in the past few years. But in the midst of all of that, certainly not despite it, we are very excited to get to go to Lebanon to uncover a little bit more of the history, the culture, meet Lebanese people, and like with the rest of these videos, try to get a bit more of a local female lens. So that's enough chit chat from us. Let's start exploring Lebanon.
Woo! Woo! Yeah.
Coming to you from
Byblos.
Apparently, this is one of the oldest inhabited towns
in
the world. There is like tracing back to like 8,000 to 7,000 BC. We're currently at the Citadel and we're seeing the beautiful architecture here. The coloring is stunning.
Absolutely stunning.
The blue of the ocean, the blue of the sky, these tan rocks, and these. Let's go explore. Citadel specifically was built by the Crusaders in the 12th century.
I read that it's like all indigenous limestone and like used a lot of like old Roman techniques, which is why I think we're seeing a lot of similarities between this and like the Acropolis.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities in architecture and stuff, which is amazing.
And this is actually not my first time to Byblos or the Citadel. I came back in 2017, which is crazy. It's one of those things where it's like, you never think you'll actually get to come back, so it's very special that I get to see it for a second time.
Yeah.
So now I'm showing this one around and giving her a lay of the land, at least of the Citadel. Gorgeous. The color scheme here. Chef's kiss. We zoom in on these guys, they're waving. Let's see that. There they are.
See him too? This place has a castle, a coliseum.
Ancient Roman remains.
Span streets. Wow, there's big ants. I've never seen such a breadth of history in one space. It's from like 8000 BC. We're sitting in a Roman Colosseum colonnade thing right now. And then there's a Crusader castle right behind us that Saladin captured. If you can ever go to Lebanon, please come here.
Come to Byblos.
I'm in awe.
So it's my favorite time for a little history lesson. We can go way back with the history of Lebanon since it's home to one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. But let's pick a starting point. The first major civilization in Lebanon were the Phoenicians, who were famous for their sea voyages all throughout the Mediterranean. And by the first millennium BC, they already had colonies as far as Tunisia and Spain, which you will see throughout the series. After the Phoenicians came a ton of empires, caliphates, and military occupations, way too many to fit here. The Ottoman Empire took over around the 1500s, and then around World War I, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed, Lebanon was placed under a French mandate, where modern development and French influence spread all throughout society. You can still hear a lot of French in the streets of Beirut today, which is actually super helpful for me and my somewhat limited high school French skills. Lebanon finally became an independent state made of 18 different religious groups. Let's fast forward to the 1950s and 60s, which are often thought of as a golden age for Lebanon. Beirut, which is nicknamed the Paris of the Middle East, really thrived as a hub of commerce and tourism. However, this period came to a sudden end in 1975 when tensions between Lebanon's different religious, ethnic, and political groups overflowed into a civil war, which was made even more complicated by interference from the surrounding countries. So, over the next 15 years, more than 100,000 people were killed and almost 1 million were displaced. The 1990s and the 2000s were filled with further challenges as Lebanon tried to rebuild while facing Syrian occupation, conflict with Israel, and intense political turmoil. Recent years have carried many more challenges, such as managing an overflow of Syrian refugees, difficulties governing the various religious and political factions, a major financial crisis, as well as a massive accidental explosion in the capital city, which you might remember from the news. All of these factors have led to a big exodus of people leaving the country, especially among young people. Today, there are more Lebanese people in the global diaspora than within Lebanon itself. This massive economic crisis going on alone has really paralyzed the financial system. Many citizens aren't able to access their savings, and inflation rates are over 180%. It's really impossible to not highlight this when speaking of Lebanon, but we're really going to try to focus on the history and the people of this beautiful country. So after Byblos, we headed back home to get ready because that night we were invited to a birthday party by the family we're staying with. We were celebrating a grandma's 70th birthday, but trust me when I mean this was by no means a chill occasion. The rumors are true. The Lebanese party like none other. I will truly take this kind of party over any event in New York City. Everyone was so kind and welcoming and excited to teach us random Americans how to join in on their dances. This was hands down one of our absolute best nights of the trip so far. Next up, we're making it to the gem of Lebanon, Beirut. The city is filled with contradictions, and it's the seat of the government, it's a cultural hub, very rich with deep history that continues to flourish despite how much it's been put to the test. Within minutes of arriving, you'll see everything from G-Wagons parked next to buggies, mosques situated next to cathedrals, an old city charm along with crumbling colonial buildings situated across from massive skyscrapers. And even though the blast was over 2 years ago, its impact still really looms all over the city. Everyone we've talked to here has their own tragic story about that day. I will say today the streets of Beirut feel far more quiet than they did when I was here many years ago. Exploring the city today, we've seen a good amount of the northern coastal part of Lebanon so far. But now we're finally in the epicenter, the biggest city, the capital. Right now we're really excited because we're headed to a shop called Sarah's Bag to meet Sarah herself, who's a really badass businesswoman. So like I said, today we're meeting Sarah, which I'm so excited about. She's this incredible Lebanese designer who actually started this company 20 years ago as a social project to train and provide jobs for female prisoners in Lebanon. Since then, it's expanded into this vibrant fashion house that now employs over 200 local women as skilled artisans, many of whom are prisoners or ex-prisoners.
So just to tell you how we work, it's actually we do the designs. And the girls who execute the designs are women either in prison or in villages. Usually the girl that comes out of the prison and we worked with for a long time, she forms a cluster. So we also encourage all her community to work with us. We work with over 200 women, and they all work in different crafts that are very specific to the Mediterranean. It is a way to continue working with the craft, and it's a way to empower these women because they use the money for their families, for their livelihood, and also to educate their kids and to better their community.
And how did you get started with this business idea and working with the women?
So I started like just a social project in the prison, training them on certain skills and trying to produce bags from the skills they're doing. And for it to be sustainable, it had to become a brand.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not into fast fashion, and I really believe that a nice piece should be worn and kept and given to your daughter, especially the pieces that have been worked by these girls, like they put their heart and souls in it. And you can see the progress, like you can see a woman that is broken, and then you see her working and empowered and making other women work, like instead of being looked down on as like she's an ex-prisoner, now she comes to the village, she supplies work to all her community. Yeah. So directly she's somebody else, and they look at her in a different way. Yeah. The collection that we launched this season is the Oasis collection, and it has a lot of palms. Mm-hmm. The Oasis collection symbolizes hope, and although everything's happened, we're still hoping that we'll be able to make it through. We do a lot of prints that are specific to Lebanon. Like this says Beirut ma betmut, Beirut never dies. After the plastic, everybody wanted to support us because this whole place was blown. Like really, all these were out. The whole facade was blown out. Wow. Here and in my offices, everything was destroyed. Seeing everything destroyed was really, really painful because is it worth continuing? Like, what should I do? Does it make sense that I do handbags still? But then you see the support. I had so much support also from the girls working with me. Yeah. They would call me from the mountain and tell me, you know what, we will come, we will clean.
So I was particularly inspired with Sarah about how she combined her business skill sets with her inherent creative and stylistic eye to create this company. I also think it's really special how these bags keep ancient artisanal techniques alive, and it feels like you're carrying a little reminder of Lebanon's beauty around with you. Though she's faced barriers as a woman in business, she's used her education, her creativity, her skill sets, and her passion for sustainability to uplift these other Lebanese women through rehabilitation and empowerment.
Right now we are like half a mile away from the original glass site. Everyone we talked to looks back at that date as like when a lot of things shifted for, unfortunately, the worst in the city.
Like everyone we've met here in Lebanon, it's come up at some point because it's such a recent catastrophe of only 2 years ago, and as either people who lost their home, loved ones, or changed their outlook on the city. So it's very intense to see in person.
I've ever been as consistently surprised walking around one city.
Yeah, you're getting a huge mix of like class disparity in architecture and religion, and you can see the influences of like French colonization, the Civil War, the blast, the economic recession. Overall, it's still really charming. You can see like the perseverance here. It's gorgeous to explore because of that massive mix. It's such an interesting region. You have a blown out building here, this right next door. The interesting juxtapositions found in Lebanon. We have the mosque, we have a church, we have some somewhat colonial architecture over there. We have ancient Roman ruins just hanging out, a Christian church again. And then over here we have the Martyr Square. So today we're going on a little road trip to Tripoli, and Tripoli is Lebanon's second largest city. It has a bit of a tricky past and unfortunately has a reputation of poverty and conflict. The city was a hotspot for violence in the civil war that I've mentioned, and the instability has continued. While this current situation is very daunting, Tripoli does have a really impressive history which we want to highlight. For centuries, it outshined Beirut as the star of Lebanon. It was the primary port city for the entire surrounding region, so it was home to massive exchanges of goods and arts and culture, you name it. It still boasts really stunning architecture, ranging from mosques to crusader castles to ancient bathhouses. We decided to meet up with a tour guide here in Tripoli, so our day focused on this really interesting history. We learned that Tripoli, for one, has the most remaining Mamluk in the world, or a kind of medieval Egyptian architecture almost, second only to Cairo itself. We also got to explore several of Tripoli's famous hammams, or public bathhouses, that can date back to the 1300s, which is crazy. It was so fascinating to think about all the lives that have stepped foot in this city long before we had the chance to visit.
From Tripoli. We're actually working with a guide, a local guide to show us around, which I think is great if you're in a different country who knows the history, who knows the local people. So she was saying like the ancient traders would come through because Lebanon was like a main trading area, and this is where they would stay. So you have the big watering section here for the horses, the camels, and then they'd stay up in these rooms up in here, and now you can still do some shopping. So I think we should go check it out.
Has it all.
Should we get some soap?
Yeah.
Oh, it's nice. Oh,
May I?
so cute. Street food test. So good. What do you think?
I am so excited to be here. This is so surreal. We are in Batroun, which is a little vacay village.
Taste test, baby.
It is licorice. Like black licorice, which is not my favorite flavor, unfortunately.
Visiting Lebanon was such a special experience for me and Sage to share together. While I felt like our hearts broke again and again hearing about people's struggles amidst the instability and the economic disaster, I was also so constantly inspired by the resilience and the creativity all around me, and was especially touched by the endless warmth and hospitality. Truly, the Lebanese are some of the most hospitable and fun people I've ever met. I really enjoyed hearing Sarah's story in particular, especially as she's breaking these barriers in business and fashion through empowering these underprivileged women throughout Lebanon. Similar to the situation in many countries across the Middle East, recent instability has actually kind of created an opportunity for old dynamics to finally shift. Young people, especially women, will really be crucial in determining the future of this beautiful country, and I sincerely hope to be able to see it again. In the meantime, we're now off to the North African portion of this trip, and we're headed to Tunis, Tunisia.